Now, team, before I go any further, I know there's a limited number of us in here in the room at the moment, and I'm going to wait a little minute because I want as many people as humanly possible to be hearing what is about hearing, literally, what's about to be heard on stage at the moment, what's going to be talked about. I can see them, they're coming in at the back there. Tom, how's it looking out there? Is there many coming towards the door at the moment? Relatively good? Well, you should go and scare people in. Those of you who are in the room, if you can do me a favour, please, and just grab your mobile phones, because one of the most pressing jobs of your MC is to remind everyone to put their phones on silent and their messages so they're not going ping, 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 and they're pinging. And if I can hear it with my hearing aids on, then that means it must be pretty dodgy. I do have hearing aids. Yeah, I do. Many, many years ago, I was diving off Indonesia, and someone else was dynamiting for fish at the same time that I was diving, so not a great combination. But that's okay in some ways, because we've got people like our first presenter who is going to ensure that my life remains enjoyable and that I can constantly hear people. This is a mild-mannered audiologist coming to join us up on stage, so let's give you the spiel. He's actually a very happy-looking audiologist, or that was his former life. What were you originally?
I'm a surgeon. I'm an actual medical doctor.
Oh, good grief, I'm so sorry. Actual medical doctor. Someone outside told me you're an audiologist. Maybe it was just the passion with which you speak. Just the hearing stuff. I'm really sorry about that. Have you read Careful This Might Hurt yet? Oh, that is hilarious. If you'd like a book to read while you're just looking at how your investments are going up, grab Careful This Might Hurt. It is an absolute scream of a book about a young doctor and what he does. Right, back to you. Let's find what my timing is. So it is 1:48. So we're actually 3 minutes behind. So this is... You talk for 10? No, I want you to have as much time as possible. We've got a couple coming in behind. So this is Dr. James Fielding, everyone, and we're going to hear from Audeara. So what I think I would like to point out about this gentleman today is that he's a lot happier, even happier, if that's possible, than when I saw him on Tuesday, because on Tuesday he was giving his presentation to everyone. Today, or this morning, he's had a good little windfall for the company. They've just been given entree into Singapore. They've been picked up in Singapore. And of course, as we all know, Singapore is kind of a doorway into the rest of Asia and potential world domination. So he's pretty happy at the moment. And there may also be a little deal that he's doing with a very large musical instrument company, which I'm not allowed to know anything about, neither are you, so we'll just pretend that didn't happen either. So if you want to take your state just behind the podium just for a minute, because I know I'll be unleashing the beast and you'll be walking. But if you stand behind, that would signal the moment for the ASX to start recording, you see. So nothing else I've said really is all that relevant. So we've got 15 minutes, and what these guys are doing is they've invented this hearing technology which really will transform the way those of us who are hearing impaired get to enjoy the rest of our lives. So please make him very welcome, everyone.
Yeah. Hey everyone, if you don't mind, is that going to go? Swap these. Hello everyone, that's better. My name is James, and it is a great privilege to be able to tell you the Audeara story. We are a company that believes wholeheartedly in the value of improving people's lives, and we do that through enhancing the entertainment experience for people that know they have a hearing loss and creating a protective advice for people that don't want to get a hearing loss. And the way we do that is by using our core proprietary technology that is focused on world-class personalized sound. And what that means is, in the world of entertainment, we focus on the person actually listening. And our technology allows us to understand what each individual needs for the best possible entertainment experience, and we get to deploy that in a number of different ways. The first way that we do that is through our Audeara brand, and that is selling Bluetooth noise cancelling over-the-ear headphones with our built-in personalization algorithm. So they are tailored headphones, and we sell them in the places where people who know they have hearing challenges are looking for solutions, and that is in audiology clinics. And over the last 2 years, we've captured every audiology clinic in Australia, And because the audiology industry is so tightly controlled, on the back of the success we've had in the Australian industry, we've launched internationally with 3 of the big 5 audiology groups. The exciting part of the business on top of that is the introduction of our business unit, which we call AUA Technology. And what that business is doing is taking our core personalization tech, our product manufacturing and sourcing expertise, and deploying product and technology for large third-party brands where we get to leverage the go-to-market and vast brand experience of well-established organizations. So what we are doing is using our own brand in the audiology industry and then using that technology in a licensing play for large third-party brands. What we've done most recently is continued our year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter growth. We've managed to refine our cash expenditure, right-size the business, and really tighten the belt to ensure that we're very well positioned for when we get the chance to launch predominantly into Europe and launch our licensing and technology plays. We've managed to maintain a strong cash position to ensure that we are ready to go when these opportunities land. And we've launched internationally alongside these big audiology players. So things of note on the Audeara side is that continued Australian wholesale growth. We launched in Austria, we launched in Hungary, and then this morning we announced to the market the launch in Singapore. And then we've been progressing our AUA technology plays with 2 key partnerships that are going to be underpinning growth in that space and are our big growth catalysts. The first is the music instrument brand we were mentioning before, so making product for a large, well-established music instrument brand. The second is a partnership we have with our most recent strategic investor, who's the largest hearing aid retailer in Taiwan with a path into China. He came in at a market premium in December, and we've entered into a contract manufacturing and product development agreement with him and his clinic groups to bring a product purpose designed to help their clinics grow. And what that's meant is that we've been able to maintain continued revenue growth since we listed, but the part that's most interesting about this chart that you can see is that the Australian side is core, it's our bedrock, it's what we do, it's government funded, we'll get into that in a minute, but it's the little parts at the top, that servicing and licensing revenue and that international growth that are just starting to kick off. They're in their introductory stages, but when they start to come online and become the solid contributors that we think, you can imagine if each one of those was as big as the core at the bottom, we're talking about substantial growth, and that's what we're on the cusp of at the moment. So moving into Audeara, which is where we put our personalized headphones into audiology clinics. Now, the reason that we put our products into clinics is because that is the place people with a hearing loss are in an active search for solutions. When we were looking at consumer models and the tech we had, the part that we needed to overcome was how are we going to provide the biggest benefit from our technology to the people that need it most. So we put it where those people are seeking solutions. And we position our products as on the way to or as well as your other hearing devices. And the consequence of that positioning is the clinics don't see us as a threat. They see us as a great addition to their business model to make more money for their customers. But for us, we get to improve the quality of lives for people that aren't ready to be jumping into the hearing aid realm, and also people that understand that hearing aids aren't the be-all and end-all of your hearing experience. They serve a really critical part of that process, but there are a number of areas in which the hearing aid is not the best solution. We get to focus on the joyful part of a hearing experience. Think watching television, Zoom calls, FaceTime with the grandkids, sitting back and just enjoying your music experience. That's where we come to the party. The reason the clinics like us is because they face a problem of people leaving without a solution, and we fix that problem. So the number of people that are walking into a clinic, sitting down, taking time, having full clinical assessments, and then leaving to come back 10 years later, if at all, is a big problem. So we are able to provide a high quality solution that gets a customer on the books early and creates a sticky point of reference to come back to that clinic at the point at which you're ready to transition to hearing aids. The reason we like the audiology clinics in Australia is because audiology clinics are the gatekeepers of two really significant government-funded revenue streams for us. The first is the Hearing Services Program, and the second is the Department of Veterans Affairs Rehabilitations Program. Those two programs, along with the NDIS, mean that the majority of people getting the benefit of our technology are doing so with zero out-of-pocket expense. There's around 1 million Australians eligible under those three government-funded schemes to utilise our technology, zero out-of-pocket expense. The other reason we like audiology clinics is because it's a very tightly held industry. There's a handful of players that dominate around 80% of the global hearing health industry. We have strong partnerships with 3 of those big 5 players, and they are taking us with them internationally on the back of the success we've had here in Australia. The other part of this channel, which is really interesting, is the introduction of big global optical chains, people that are selling specs to people, like Specsavers, who stock our products here in Australia. They're adding ears to eyes. And what was announced most recently was Luxottica starting to play in the game. So they've introduced hearing tech into some specs to see if a glasses form factor is a great way to start introducing hearing technologies. So what we have are people that are really well refined in a retail and conversion space, seeing hearing as the next frontier to get growth in their industry. And in Australia, we've partnered with the best of them, which is Specsavers. And what that means is that we have Australia sewn up at 1,400 clinics. We have the biggest player in Taiwan. We have a new entrant into the Singaporean market who used to be the managing director of the Asia Pac division of 2 of the big 5 over his 20-year history. We have trials kicking off with Demont and WSA in the USA, and we have national launches with Demont and WSA in Europe, being Austria for WSA and Hungary for Demont, with Amplifon to come, which we're incredibly excited about. We got to add Singapore to the list, which was quite nice. And our goal is to take this financial 24 pipeline of countries and move them from pipeline into effective. The next part of the business that we're incredibly excited about is AUA technology. And why we like this particular business model is it gets to utilize our technology, provide that high quality outcome for the people who need it, but as a business model, it's pure cream. It's us taking a clip of the ticket on the sales and go-to-market capability of incredibly well-established brands. It utilizes our core R&D, which has been funneling our Audeara technology and our Audeara platform, and now we get to put that tech into third-party products. The first one that I'd like to tell you about is with our most recent strategic investor, Mr. David Lin, who runs Clinico Inc., who are one of the largest optical distributors in Taiwan and China and are starting to introduce hearing, and they're the largest hearing aid retailer in Taiwan. Mr. Lin came in December for 2.8 million at a premium, and we're co-developing a product specifically for his clinics, the technology of which we will then be able to deploy through the rest of our global distribution channels. And then we have our global music instrument brand, which is all very secret and very sexy and I can't tell you about, but I'm incredibly excited about, because the scale into a consumer-focused US-dominated market will be our first opportunity to be reaping the benefits of large US consumer brands. And what that means is that the more product they order to meet their demand, the more bottom line cash flows support we get on that path to profitability. So as you can see, we started off with our introductory product to prove the technology. We then reinforced the business model by adjusting the technology to better suit the clinics so we can convert a higher number of patients at the clinic level. We're going to continue to refine and reinforce that core technology into the AO3 range. We're going to be introducing our first ever in-ear healthy earbud product alongside one of the strongest players in the Asian audiology industry. And we have our global music instrument consumer brand coming to market. So as you can see, we're incredibly excited about what we've got to come, and we look forward to having you on the journey. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any questions at all?
No, you sure? You've got the man himself right here. Okay.
Oh, the share price is dirt cheap, by the way, so get it
Just
now.
add that one in.
Yeah.
I had a chat.
Yes, you had a question?
Wait, I'm at the back. Hold on. Oh, yeah, but I'm deaf. Remember, I got hearing aids. That's why he's here.
Hi. Just wondering, with the personalised headphones,
Yeah.
can normal people buy them or not really?
Unhearing impaired people, yes.
Yeah.
Non-hearing impaired people can get incredible benefit from our technology, and we also sell to a lot of healthy kids whose parents don't want them to go deaf, and they're becoming more hearing health conscious. We've recently become the healthy hearing partner of the Brisbane Lions AFL team to try and encourage people to add hearing health into their overall health and wellness. So we very much believe that a personalised sound experience is going to become the norm for all technologies, and we want to be at the forefront of that.
And are they available at ordinary audiologist clinics?
Yes, all of them. And you can get them at the .com as well. So you can come to Audeara.com, you can get our headphones.
Have you got them outside?
I don't, well, I have one you can look at, but you can't take those because they're
Thank
mine.
you.
But yes, I can give you a
Use,
mate's
that's
rate code.
20% off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you actually sold them all out in Brisbane. You had,
Yes,
you
we
sold
sold an
them up in
awful lot of the
Brisbane.
Gold Coast.
Those people up there got them before us. Would you please thank him very much, everyone, and follow the story. And I was saying to some of your colleagues outside beforehand, I said, you know what, because when I come to conferences like this and I want to hear, I find it very challenging depending on how the room is set up acoustically. I said, you know what would be great? And Shane's heard me witter on about this before. Shane's our audio and our tech guru over there, everyone. Wouldn't it be great if there was a way that we could stream what was in the desk, what was going into these microphones, straight into people's hearing aids? And your mate said...
Yes, imagine if you knew a guy like me that could make that a reality. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hopefully by next year we can be doing that. So the next frontier of technology is a transition from static one-to-one Bluetooth, you pair to a thing and that's it, to make it more like an RF frequency band, so one to many, but not RF tune in, it's a direct pair, so the quality is incredible. And so hopefully by next year we can be showcasing that technology here, because that's the forefront. And with the skill and guidance of our recent strategic investor who has his foot on the pulse, we can...
Before you go, you'd be surprised how many people sit in a conference or a talk like this, they can't hear what the person's saying, but they don't say anything.
I wouldn't be surprised at all, unfortunately. Yeah, we tested a bunch of kids at my high school as well, and it's 1 in 10 10-year-olds. Hearing loss is not an old person problem, it's a human being problem, and we just need to get on the front foot.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that conversation. Put your hands together, everyone. Audeara. And I actually host the National Alzheimer's Conference as well. Untreated early onset hearing loss. So for those of us who say, I don't want to wear a hearing aid, I don't want people to see it. Well, you're doing yourself a disservice because it's also a key marker for early onset dementia. So go and have it looked at and get yourself something like these. All right, ASX, can't hear me. Look about loud things. ACDC. ACDC Metals. What is ACDC Metals doing at a tech conference? Let's find out. Let's get the big fella up here. So one of our speakers earlier on asked the question, who of you invested in resources companies? And I saw there's a couple of sheepish, putting out make sure we've got some safety there. So when I ask you this question, I know you'll have the answer. What country has all the rare earths needed for the clean energy transition? It is Australia, correct. Which country has got the majority of value adding being done? Which country are we sending those rare earths to? China, correct. Now, can we see a problem with that? It's not working out for us really well at this point in time, is it? And we've got a lot of governments around the world saying, actually, we're going to get behind anyone, not anyone, very technically adept people, who can find a solution to this problem so that we are not reliant on China. Enter stage right, ACDC Metals, headed by this fellow here. So this is rare earth extraction technology from Australia. It's your next investment opportunity. And this fellow here is Tom Davidson, and he is the CEO of ACDC Metals. Please make him welcome.
Hi all, and thank you for the opportunity. Very pleased to be here to share with you today the ACDC story and why we're worth a close look with the opportunity for a re-rate. I hope you all agree that the name is a memorable one, and I hope you find the story is as well. The essential disclaimer. So I'm an engineer, not a geologist, so there'll be no forward-looking statements to be too outlandish. The strategy. So essentially, ACDC is completely connected to the energy transition, supplying materials for the efficient low carbon capture and storage of energy. We aren't the first ones trying to achieve these aims, of course. It's a massive opportunity for Australia. Our aim is to be the supplier of separated rare earth elements within Australia using innovative technology and using the mineral monazite as a byproduct from mineral sands mining. The time for Australia selling low value materials offshore is gone, and we're really excited to be playing our part. So why ACDC? So as I mentioned, we've got that exposure to the energy transition. The markets, the governments are demanding this change and to remove that downstream processing onto Australian shores. We recently went through an IPO at Christmas time. We listed in January, we raised 8 million. We've just quarterly, we've still got 6 million left in the bank. We've been hitting our milestones for the last 6 months. We've just completed a large drilling program across our projects in Western Victoria. So I guess that's the resource sort of side of things, but that's giving us the resource monazite. We're also now progressing into our studies with the technology side of things. And obviously our key differentiator is this, the processing technology which will enable the sort of previously used technologies used in China and elsewhere to deploy in Australia and to ensure that they meet the environmental permitting hurdles and provide those efficiencies and returns for shareholders. So we've pulled together a strong board who have had a lot of exposure to rare earths projects around the world and the corporate success as well. So our capital structure. So this is a bit of an easy story to tell. Our market cap, we're at cash backing. I guess the key one is down on the bottom right there where we muck against our peers. Obviously they're at a few stages ahead of us, but that's the upside. So once we get through those hurdles and once we get our JORC resource coming out in the next few months, that's when really people can peg us against those other ones and benchmark us and then really see that opportunity. So rare earths, why do we need them? So essentially, I'm sure everyone's heard about the energy transition, the movement to electric vehicles, wind turbines. Essentially, it all comes down to permanent magnets. Magnets is really the key one to remind yourself of. And there's 4 sort of key elements that make up those magnet metals, and that's the praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium, and neodymium. And so as you can see, there's lots of projections out there that from now to 2030, you know, the car sales, EV car sales is going to double. So therefore, the demand for this NdPr is going to increase. So then to take a step back and look at the supply chain. So where is all this processing occurring at the moment? So the first pie chart there is the mining. So there's relatively good exposure across the world of rare earth mining, but then everyone gets that to a concentrate and then ships that offshore. And then every step else beyond that is, you know, greater than 85, 90% done there. And obviously this last sort of COVID period and these last few years has really highlighted the fact that the reliance that we do have on the Chinese market and the desire by government around the world to bring this downstream processing onshore. And so we can't just go along and pick up that technology and drop it into an Australian setting. So there needs to be technology advancements in the processing to create energy efficiencies, to minimise waste, and to really improve the ESG commitments for downstream OEM providers, which then can provide to the end user that commitment. And so the opportunity, so at the moment, you know, you would have heard of Australia, the US, Europe having these large grants, funds created to encourage the West to develop these downstream processing technologies. And so the strategy of ACDC, the mine to magnet, and so this is, I guess, our pictorial where we really looked to outline exactly what we're about. So this is the first part, which is the resource side of things, the mining side of things. So at the moment we have our mineral sand tenements in Western Victoria. And so that would be, the vision there would be producing building a process plant there, which would be physical separation. So that would produce the standard HM heavy mineral concentrate that has always been. There's well-established markets. So that's your zircons, your titanias, which go into ceramics and paint pigment markets. And then monazite is really the key differentiator that's come out in the last few years. So monazite is part of that whole energy transition. 5 years ago, that was only worth $500-600 a tonne. It's now worth between $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a tonne because everyone's trying to get that monazite because it contains 60% rare earths. And so at the moment, a lot of the countries around the world will produce that rare earth concentrate, that monazite, and then sell that to China. And so the opportunity is then to drop in the next stage, and that's where I guess ACDC is then saying, we'll come along and build a second plant or a project that will then take that carbonate and do the first stage of separation. And then I guess when we've been talking to the various departments in Victoria and South Australia, you know, once someone like us come along and do that first step, then the next steps will follow. And that's the magnets. And that's the part that everyone wants to get to. The sort of sexy end is manufacturing magnets. But you've got to get through those steps to be able to get there. So mineral sands, yeah. So they're rich in heavy minerals and then rare earths. And that's always been a known fact. So in the Western Victoria, the Murray Basin, Rio Tinto or CRA back then drilled, you know, did extensive drilling through there where they were only looking for heavy minerals. But the monazite was there, they knew it was there, but it wasn't considered a product then. It was always considered a waste product. But obviously now with this, you know, transition and the desire for those metals, it's become something of need. And so these are our key projects. So I won't go too far into the whole resource drilling side of things. I'll focus on the tech. But I guess the main sort of thing here is this 6 months we've just spent drilling a lot there. All our results are coming out of the labs at the moment, and we're working towards our maiden JORC resource in the next quarter. So that's really the sort of key takeaway from that side of things. So just to give a quick sort of background of mineral sands. So there's zircon, titania, and then the monazite and the xenotime. So the monazite and the xenotime, they're the ones that contain the rare earth metals. And so you can see on the little graph there that it's had a real spike jumping up. And that's what's sort of encouraging the people to develop these downstream processing. And they're the four of focus. So they're the ones that are really into the required for the magnets. You know, terbium and dysprosium, their main requirement is they get added to the magnet to help its heat resistance, and so you don't demagnetize. And so it's, you know, they're expensive, big revenue makers, those elements. So our technology. So the technology is based on Medallion Resources, so a Canadian company listed on the TSX. So ACDC went into an exclusive agreement with them for the use of it within Australia, or Eastern Australia. And so essentially they've taken the well-known process of the caustic crack process, which has been used, it was used in La Rochelle in France in the 70s, Mountain Pass in California in the 80s, 90s, and then it was all then stopped, and then the technology all went to China. And so the development and the progress is all sort of held there, and you know, they don't have the same sort of environmental barriers that we need to jump through to get there, and so that's been the real technical work that's happened over the last 6 years. So they're doing a lot of work in Saskatchewan Research Council, which is the equivalent of ANSTO here in Australia. And so the main advancements have really been running a continuous process which enables the energy efficiency. So a lot of the recoveries of heat recovery to reduce that energy consumption, maximize reagent consumption, and really reduce that waste efficiency. So the main one with the waste is the phosphate can come off as a fertilizer and sell as a local product. And then you're really minimizing that waste stream down to a really small number. And so the benefits of this technology, obviously going in a continuous operation, you can minimise the number of operators, the exposure to that harsh environment, and then the efficiencies in reagents and technology, electricity consumption. And then this really is the big positive, the ESG point of view. So that sort of helps the whole, when you're looking at the, so you're talking to like say a Siemens type where they're at the end, they can then work through the whole value chain of how they got to that point. And so that real ESG is a real big factor. And also with our Medallion, the process plant, we don't have to feed it from our own tenement in Western Victoria. So we can either feed it our own monazite there, or we can import monazite from anywhere else in the world. So we have that third-party offtake. So if there's other projects further ahead with the mineral sands, and we can use their monazite, so that sort of really delinks that risk for ACDC. So as far as the timeline goes for the REP plant, so we've just finished our drill program in Western Victoria, and at the same time as looking to develop the resource, we grabbed additional 3 tonnes worth of sample to use for met test work. So that 3 tonnes is across about 80 odd holes. So, you know, it's a bit of a painstaking task for the guys on the ground, but that'll be utilised for test work next year with ANSTO. And so that'll be really enabling us to test the real points in the process that need validating, so that we can do our TechKnow economic valuations and to roll into a PFS next year and then FS the year after that. So at the moment, we're just engaging consultants, environmental and hydromet consultants to start the process of understanding the roadmap to permitting. So Medallion had previously looked at this in a US setting. And so we just need to make sure that we don't need to do tweaks to the process to accommodate that Australian setting. So we've started that process. We're well advanced on that, and we're targeting Q4 this year to have a scoping study done for the REP plant. And that will really enable us then to set us up to move forward into the next stage of testing. And then just as a bit of an overview, so for ACDC in the short term, what the real triggers are for the value add and you know what can make the share price move in the next quarter or so. So a lot of those assay results that I mentioned from the drilling that we've just been completing, they'll be coming out in the next month or two. Our JORC resource, which is really the big one that we're really excited about. That's the one that will enable us to really peg ourselves against our peers, and then be able to sort of have some meaningful conversations, you know, about the valuations of the company. And then into Q4 this year will then be the scoping studies for both our mineral sands plant and for the REP plant. So I guess as a key sort of summary takeaways, you know, we've pulled together a strong team, rare earth experience. You know, it's hard to find people that have gone through and done a lot of this development and understand the test work and the technical hurdles that you need to get through to get to a point of confidence. Our execution to date, so we've delivered on what we said in our prospectus. We've raised money that will enable us to deliver our plan for 2 years. We're 6 months in and we're remaining on track. We still have plenty of money in the bank, 6 million still in the bank, and you know everything's being lined up at the moment. So, and our business model, so we provide that great exposure to the energy transition, that critical mineral space. You know, the mine to magnet strategy, it grabs eyes, and it's a good conversation. And the downstream value add for Australia is a big opportunity. So yeah, we're excited to be involved in it. Thank you.
Good on you, Tom. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah. And I was actually chatting with Tom earlier on today because I was doing another piece for an investment mag recently, and then they reminded me of, has anyone tried to buy a luxury car? I haven't, because I don't have the money for that at the moment, but if you've tried to buy a luxury car in the last 18 months, one of the issues that those luxury cars has come with is they don't have a little electronic slide to go forward, some of them at the moment, because they can't find the battery, they can't find the magnets that are needed, the praseodymium and neodymium that they need to make the silly little magnet that will slide the seat forward and slide the seat back. So little tiny things like that which you don't think about, but they do affect people's quality of life, not me, apparently. All right, I've got 4 children, can't afford that. We're going to still power the world, tech to change the future. Sparc Technologies joining us up on stage now, cutting-edge tech that aims to improve our environment. 3 core areas of development: green hydrogen, graphene-based additive product, and the other one is a sodium-ion battery that's going to make lithium look not as sexy as it thinks it is. Who are these 2 fellas here? Can I use dad joke? These are two bright sparks from the company. I know. I sat there, anyway, this is a doctor, Dr. Denis Wright. He won't tell you any silly jokes. He actually used to be an organic medicinal chemist in a former life. He's got many strings to his bow. At the moment, right now, he's really focused on battery materials. And behind him is the fabulous Nick O'Loughlin, who is the GM of Renewable Energy for Sparc. Would you please make them both very welcome?
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me? Yes, up the back. I can throw my voice all right. Beauty. Horse riding lessons when I was younger. First thing, any stuff we do and we talk about, that's the disclaimer. Don't go and buy shares just because of us. Go and do your own financial research. Next bit, who are we? Sparc Technologies, based out of Adelaide. Interesting company. Two main areas to it. Myself and Nick. I look after the graphene materials part of the business, which is on this left-hand side. Can I go backwards with this thing? Red button? Beauty. All right, we'll do that. I look after the graphene side of the business, which is anti-corrosive paints and composites. Nick over here with me, or me with Nick, depending on the perspective. Green hydrogen and the sodium-ion batteries, and we come together for the H2 coatings and the photocatalysts. Sit in the same office, just working in different areas. Very interesting business. No, I'll make it easy for them.
You're good, but you're not that good.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, now I have to talk quietly. So here's our business thing. 85 million shares. At the moment, they're about 26, 27 cents. Market cap about 23 mil. Shareholders, top 20 shareholders, 40%-ish. Board members have a fair bit. Adelaide Uni, where we came from. So the business was grown out of Adelaide University about initially 5 years ago, where some work was done. And then I was given birth in its current format about 3 years ago. And so Adelaide Uni has about 8%. University of Adelaide has about 8% as well. Fairly concise sort of a team. You've got myself and Nick down the bottom, CFO, plus the board of directors there. Been through this a little bit already. First comment, what is graphene? Graphene is actually in its purest form, black powder. You know, where do we add value to the black powder? You take the black powder, which we source from all over the world. You take that and you put it into a polymer medium, so clear araldite, for want of a better word. You stir it up in that, and Milo versus quick. If you stir it up and it doesn't disperse properly and it looks like Milo in milk, then it ain't going to work. If it looks like quick or a nice pancake smooth mix, then it is going to work. What does that mean? That means that whatever you put it into, it's going to impart some properties into it, and we'll get into that in a minute. Here's another bit of a target market. Where do we want to use graphene in the world? Coatings, paint, marine and protective coatings, anti-fouling and composites. On the coatings one, Australia's a wonderful country. It only has 25 or 30 million people, and so most of our customers, so our client base, are global. I do as many meetings at night with the US and Europe. So us as a business, we're not functioning at a local level, we're functioning at a global level, which is important because the global markets they're global and they're a hell of a lot bigger, so more money can be made. On the composites, again, global, US focused with our customer base there, and slightly earlier development cycle than in the coatings, but still getting some good data and results and some bites of the cherry there. Nick, do you want to do 2 minutes on renewable? All right. On the renewable piece, the renewable side, there's a joint venture between Sparc, University of Adelaide, and a little company called Fortescue, where Sparc's the majority shareholder. Fortescue's got about 12%, 20%, and University of Adelaide's got most of it. And on the batteries, that's slightly earlier, TRL again, but it's a focus on sodium-ion batteries. There is a slight shortage of lithium coming up in the future. And if you go and look at the sea, there's a fair bit of sodium hanging around. And so sodium-ion batteries and the data that we're getting and the development that it's getting at the moment seem to be a good area to focus on a couple of years ago. And with some foresight, it looks like we were correct in that. So there's some good data and results coming from that as well. Okay, graphene. Bottom left-hand corner there, that's a picture of graphene. Anybody put your hands up if you've done 10 years of chemistry at university? I've got one. You poor thing, I'm so sorry. All right, forget all that. Paddle pop sticks, bottom left-hand corner. Paddle pop sticks with pins in them, okay? You can collapse it like a wine rack. Single sheet, carbon. You know, the technical term is sp2 hybridized, sheets of hexagonal carbon. What that actually means is some paddle pop sticks glued together that you can do this with and flex a bit. If you grab that graphene and stick it into something like paint that is brittle, it will make it more elastic and flexible and elongate a little bit more. It imparts the properties of the material itself into the material that it's put into. Technical term, that's a composite. So fiberglass, carbon fiber, that sort of stuff. Coatings, it goes into coatings. We have wads of data that say that it improves the properties of the coating with regard to flexibility, impact resistance, etc., etc., etc. There's a fairly big growth market. You can see it there. It's not small, and we're a participant in it. Our position in graphene. If you go and Google graphene, there's lots and lots of stuff on the internet. There's lots of companies selling graphene. There's lots of companies using graphene. Our particular position, we are fortunate and blessed to have a fair bit of experience in our team. For instance, Global Technical Director of AkzoNobel and Hempel, which are two of the top 5 paint companies in the world. He's our European representative. We have the Global Marketing Director of AkzoNobel, again, multi-billion-dollar company. He's our representative in the USA. I myself, I've got 23 years experience in the Asia Pacific region as a technical manager, and I'm the junior member of the team. So that's quite nice. I've got these guys, and because of that, we've got links back into the industry. It doesn't get you a sale or anything like that. It gets you a phone call. If you haven't done the work and the data, that's all you get. And so we've got the comprehensive in-house data and testing in the language of the customer, which takes years to do. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and one of the guys at the conference who works in graphene, and we know each other a little bit, he said, yeah, we looked at coatings. It was just too hard. There was too much work to do to get it over the line. We spent 3 years getting that data together. Not all sources of graphene are the same. You get the wrong source, it won't work. Hit to miss ratio, 1 to 5. So we've done the work to get the 1. So our hit rate is good. So when we go and talk to the customer, the client, we've got a good hit rate, and we are confident that our material, our graphene-based additive, will work. We've got IP and we're protecting it via patents, and we've got some expertise in graphene. So anybody who wants to give a call, we can have a chat. We've got a commercial facility that got commissioned in March. We can tint, trait 5 to 10 million litres of paint. That sounds like a big number. It's not. It's a reasonable sized number, but the idea is to supply in region of commercialisation. So we're looking at a spot in the UK at the moment. I'm over there in a few weeks' time for some toll manufacture of our material that we're trialling and testing and making sure we get the scale up right in little old Adelaide. The corrosion improvement. I talked about improvement in film and all that sort of stuff, and if you go home and anybody's got a shed at home and it's quite old, look at your vertical members of your shed and you get cracks and rust starting to form in the corners and the edges, and that's the rust forming. When you put graphene into something, it increases the strength and the resistance of it, and there's an international test called ISO 12944 Annex B, and you measure how much the rust spreads. It's very nerdy, but it's actually not bad, and it's what all the global paint companies use, and it takes 6 months to do. 4,200 hours of testing. Our data shows 40%'s a big number. You know, you've got to put something up there. We regularly get over 20 to 30 sort of percent. That's the standard number we sort of get across testing, across generations. What that does, why is it of value to anybody? Talk to an asset owner, big oil company. They've got a piece of steel. They've got to paint it 5 times over 50 years. I've got to stop now. 5 minutes. Okay. If they only have to paint it 4 times, they save themselves a heap of money, and they also save themselves a heap of time. Customer base, that's who we might be talking to, or not, but might be. And here's Nick for green stuff.
Thanks, Dennis. You can tell Dennis was a teacher as well in a former life. So, yeah.
Big green button in the middle.
We'll skip the video because we don't have as much time, but that is on our website as well.
For decades, we've
There we go, I'll flick through that. So you may be wondering the link between hydrogen and graphene and how does that all fit in? Ultimately, there's not a huge link other than we were a trusted partner of the University of Adelaide. They had some issues with coating of their photocatalyst materials on a substrate, and they knew we had coating experts at Sparc. So they asked for help with that particular problem. We said, yes, we can help, but we're very interested in the project as well. And we ended up investing. Unbeknownst to us, Fortescue had been looking at the same technology out of U of A for the last year or so. And so they form part of the joint venture as well. And they obviously add a lot of support, credibility, etc., to what we're doing there. What is photocatalytic water splitting? Well, it's an alternative way to produce green hydrogen, which doesn't require an electrolyser, put simply. So the splitting of water, which is what an electrolyser is doing by pumping a lot of electricity through it, is done on a photocatalyst material itself. So it's the photocatalyst doing the work, and the hydrogen and oxygen are being produced on different parts of the photocatalyst effectively. It's a highly engineered material. We're not actually producing photocatalyst material ourselves. Our IP and our development is around a photocatalytic water splitting reactor. So it's where you combine that photocatalyst with the water and the sunlight, which is required to catalyse that reaction. So that is what we're doing within Sparc Hydrogen. We're developing better reactors for performing photocatalytic water splitting. And before we got involved in the project, University of Adelaide and Flinders had been running with the project for over 5 years with government funding largely, research funding. And they made some key breakthroughs in that field to understand that photocatalytic water splitting is improved at, number one, at high temperatures. And if you use concentrated solar, i.e. if you use mirrors or lens to focus light onto the reactor, or using a hell of a lot less photocatalyst material than you would be otherwise if you were just laying out panels in the form of solar PV, for example. So we're basically combining concentrated solar with photocatalytic water splitting, and we believe we're the leaders in the field globally. There's often talk about the colours of a hydrogen, which people may have heard of. We are comparable to electrolysis-based, green hydrogen in every single way. We're using water as a feedstock, no carbon emissions. Other than the fact we're not using electrolysers, we don't need high voltage grid infrastructure. That makes it really interesting for a country like Australia, remote towns, mining assets, etc., where there's still a use case for hydrogen, but not necessarily the infrastructure. In terms of what we're up to at the moment, so we're actually timely standing here today. The first step of this technology out of the lab is occurring in the next sort of couple of weeks at the CSIRO in Newcastle. They have a concentrated solar field that we're looking to utilise, and we'll be running prototype tests with a sort of 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre reactor over the 2 to 4 weeks, so the back end of August. So that'll be really exciting, important for the technology development. Beyond that, we're looking to deploy a pilot plant, which would be using our preferred concentrated solar array, which is called a linear Fresnel concentrated solar system. And we'll be developing that somewhere in the Adelaide region with proximity to both Sparc and the researchers at the university. So there's a lot of work going on. I've got a project manager hired back in March to run these activities, and then a lot of support provided from ourselves and Fortescue and the university. That's the partnership which Denis touched on. And there's a lot of advantages vis-a-vis the competition. We're on a completely different technology path, and that has implications for the rate at which costs come down for this particular technology vis-a-vis electrolysis, who's sort of a competitor, albeit we don't necessarily see it being an either or. We see it as being complementary in many ways. Just to touch very quickly on sodium-ion batteries, we are developing not a battery itself, but a hard carbon anode material which goes into the sodium-ion battery, just like graphite is in a lithium-ion battery. And we're sourcing that material from a bio-waste feedstock and using sort of a lower energy, lower carbon intense process to process that material through to hard carbon that can be used in a battery. We had some really exciting results back in March, which were released to the ASX. We're continuing to sort of work on that, optimise the material with Queensland University of Technology. And there's hopefully some good news coming out of that relatively soon. Thank you, everyone.
That was impressive. You're much better behaved than the doctor, Nick. Well done. Go and have a chat with him. You need to up your pay rate and your time on the stage. Great presentation. Would you please thank Sparc? That was wonderful. Really good. Really interesting. Now, our next company, they are speeding up the process that detects the parasites that can infect your gut and make life very, very unpleasant. They're operating in a sphere called the molecular diagnostics market. Now, that is expected to reach $28.6 billion in the next few years. So the stock we're going to hear from is Genetic Signatures, and they're about to submit their very first FDA application, which could be opening up the US of A for this little company. Dr. John Melki is going to walk us through the opportunity and its upside, and let's see if he's able to convince us to jump on board before they make the submission. So there's a bit more upside. Make him welcome, please.
Thanks so much. A pleasure to be here to tell you a little bit more about Genetic Signatures. What we do is infectious disease detection. We're a 22-year-old company, and as I say, we're focused on the better detection of infectious diseases. Why? Because infectious diseases are a leading cause of death and inherently preventable. If you're better able to detect, or you can detect more quickly, you're able to administer treatment earlier or even isolation if there is no treatment. You've heard of superbugs and the like. We know there's a class of bacteria that claims 10 lives every minute around the globe. They're resistant to antibiotics, so it's a very high mortality rate. How we do it is through a patented technology, and it's an Australian technology developed in Sydney. It's called 3-base, and it's a method that makes organisms more similar to each other. So we're able to detect groups of organisms more easily, and the method itself is also resistant to a lot of those mutations and variants that you hear about in the media. So given we're at an investment conference, the investment highlights are obviously our core technology that is unique to Genetic Signatures. Only we can use that. It's covered under multiple patents. As I said, it dramatically reduces the complexity of detecting the DNA or the RNA of the organism. So what we say is we give more information using fewer reagents. We are, as I said, a 22-year-old company. Since releasing this to market, we have had strong commercial adoption, up till now primarily in Australia, but we are expanding into the much bigger markets of Europe and the US. So we do have 4 diagnostic kits already cleared. There are 5 kits coming through completing development and expanding our distributor network throughout Europe. As you heard, we're preparing now a submission for the FDA, which really will be the start of our US commercialization. So I will be telling you more about that. We do have multiple drivers for growth. We have the expansion that I just spoke about. We also have the product expansion that if you think of our kits as printer cartridges, the more cartridges we have, obviously, each one is revenue generating. We do also supply instrumentation. They're printers in that model, and we've quadrupled the number of instruments that we have in the field since the beginning of the pandemic. So in terms of a company snapshot, we're around a market cap of around 87.5 million for a global diagnostics. Molecular manufacturer is probably on the low side. There are some recent research reports that you can grab on our website or on our stand outside, with some of those have target prices upwards of $2. In terms of the register, Chris Abbott, who you may know from Maple Brown Abbott, was a founder of the company 22 years ago, which is why he has a 25% holding. He did almost single-handedly finance us for many, many years. But more recently, we've welcomed Perennial, Fidelity, Thorney onto the register. So it is a TechKnow conference, so I did want to tell you about our tech. You don't need any biology, but I'm sure that you've heard that DNA and RNA has an alphabet, and it's a 4-letter alphabet, A, C, G, and T. What you may not know is that C letter of the alphabet is inherently unstable. So it often mutates to a T letter. And that accounts for, in some cases, 90% of mutation. So you've heard of all the COVID variants, it's usually this kind of mutation. So our scientists thought, what if we could force that mutation, that C to T mutation? And on the left here, I've got a number of sequences. This is actually human papillomavirus. It's a virus that is the causative agent for cervical cancer. 200 variants, this is just 3 variants, but you can see this top strand has 2 C letters, this has no T's, this has 1 C. After 3-base conversion, all of those sequences are now identical. So for genetic signatures, we just detect 1 sequence. Everybody else needs to detect all of those variants in order to have a molecular test with high sensitivity. So I hope that makes sense. If it didn't, the other example I use is spelling, US spelling compared to Australian spelling with the S versus the Z. So apologise or realise, they're the same word spelt a little bit differently. If there was a way to convert a Z to an S, then if you did a word search with the S, you would pick up both variants of that same word. So it's very similar to just doing a search for an organism. The technology lends itself to detecting groups of organisms, and this is really important because a lot of infections have the same symptoms, and we know about respiratory symptoms, we know about gastrointestinal symptoms, multiple causes. They could be viral, bacterial, fungal, and so what we're able to do quite easily is to look for all of those causes of, the potential causes of the infection, effectively in one test, and we do that on one single patient sample. So it's what we call syndromic testing or multiplex testing. So you have some symptoms, there are multiple causes, and if you use a test like ours, you're able to look for many, many different organisms. In fact, we have tests for over 100 different organisms. We're able to mix and match them in a way that makes sense clinically for the doctors to understand what might be causing those symptoms. So I've talked about success. The best way to evidence that, I guess, is revenue. People understand revenue. And this is our most recent year compared to the 4 years before that. We have been anticipating a decline in COVID-only revenue for some time. We've been talking about this for years, that it will come down, but we were focused on converting our COVID-only revenue to this syndromic testing, which we had well before the pandemic. And really the 2 things to take away from this is that we've experienced a 4-fold in growth from before the pandemic to now. And so we really were able to leverage the pandemic, and that the testing that we're doing now is predominantly syndromic testing. So this is that sticky revenue. This is the revenue we get when hospitals and path labs use our technology and use our kits. Being scientifically trained, I always like to evidence most things that I say, and this is the fairest way I thought I could do it, is if we were just to have a look at our growth of the half year before the pandemic. So this is the first half of FY20, and compare that to the current financial year. And you can see that 60% compound growth rate. It's a 4-fold increase in that core revenue, which correlates nicely with the 4-fold increase that we've had, the 4-fold increase in instruments that we've seen in the field. The other thing I said was that we've returned to core revenue. So this is the last 8 quarters. The light blue at the top of each bar is COVID-only sales, and the dark blue is our traditional syndromic testing. So you can see we've pretty much returned to the majority of that sticky revenue, recurring revenue. In terms of the kits that have generated that revenue, the majority of that revenue came from our 2 most mature kits. They're for detection of the causative agents of respiratory or enteric infections. And the exciting part, as I said at the beginning, is that we actually have a number of kits that are coming through the development pathway. Remembering these are our cartridges for the printer. All of these tests work in exactly the same way, and we're very keen to get them through development, through validation, and get regulatory clearances. A number of them have approvals already in Australia and Europe, but we do know that the US is the biggest market globally. It speaks for about 40% of the molecular market. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about for a few minutes, because it really is a great opportunity for a company like Genetic Signatures. And we're targeting enteric protozoan, as you heard in the introduction, and that is the traditional testing for enteric protozoans is looking down a microscope. You take a stool sample, you put on a microscope, you stain it, you look down and try and identify these protozoan cysts. And what the market told us in the US, they told me directly on a number of visits, is that they're very slow because you need a highly trained technician to have a look. So reporting times are over a week. They're not very sensitive, 50% sensitivity in some cases, which is not very high. And they lose money. The reimbursement rate in the States is tens of dollars for this kind of test. So working with key opinion leaders, we came up with an enteric protozoan screening kit. We detect 8 of the most common protozoan targets. Our closest competitor detects 3. So those additional targets allow us to replace the traditional test of looking down a microscope. And those same customers now can use a test, report the results the same day, have sensitivities and specificities into the high 90s, and actually turn it into a profit center. There's an existing CPT code of $263 US for every test of these that they perform. So we're well underway in terms of prepping the market. Our website has a lot of webinars from key opinion leaders. We have a direct sales and marketing staff already in the US, warehousing. We're pretty much ready to go. In terms of exactly where we are, we actually finished the trial a year ago, but we had a lot of extra work to do because of the unmet need. We had to satisfy the FDA that our test is performing, is safe and effective in what it does. So we're really at that final stage. Everything's done. We're just writing those final reports, and then we will file this to the FDA. And we anticipate that will be in the coming weeks. So very close, as I said, to our commercial launch in the US, but followed very closely by our second product. So we have announced the market recently that there is a second US trial that's 80% complete already. And this is one that targets respiratory infections, so SARS-CoV-2 as well as flu A, flu B, and a number of other targets. So being 80% complete means we should be able to get through the trial certainly by the end of the year. We'll write the application, and it will be following our first one fairly closely. It's not all about the US. Obviously, we have Europe is about 30% of the global market. We have direct staff there. We're putting on extra staff. We just announced on Monday that we've put on 2 new distributors, and they'll cover the Middle East and Israel. We prepare a lot of user focus groups. I was in the US in March, sitting down in front of the leading clinical ID doctors and having them tell us what it is that they need in the market. So a lot of our kits are designed by our customers and by the clinicians who will rely on them. Attend a lot of meetings, and we have these, it's a real pleasure to go and have these really nice big stands in amongst all these American companies. So we very proudly represent Australia at these meetings. I've spoken, I guess, a little on our growth initiatives. It's really about leveraging the success that we've had in Australia. As I said, the majority of our revenue to date comes from Australia. So we do have a lot of knowledge and really leveraging that into those new and bigger markets. We're expanding our menu, they're revenue generating, and securing registrations for those kits. It's about embedding our technology in our lab, because when we develop new kits, they go straight on the same instrument. It's exactly the same type of process that they're used to doing. I didn't have time to talk about our next generation instrument. There is some information on our website, but this is a true sample to result instrument. You put the sample in one side, the instrument does the work, reports the results back to the hospital system. very little hands-on time. So it's quite a big investment for us. So I think the upcoming milestone should be very clear. It's all about FDA and the next one. It's about increasing our sales and presence in those bigger offshore markets, completing those clinical trials and focusing on our R&D, continuing to make our products better and better. So our booth is outside. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Melki. Appreciate it. Yeah, and we do have a number of our presenters staying out there at the moment too. Right, we have got 2 opportunities for your portfolio left before we do a brief fireside investment chat up here, which Jackson is organising. Our last company today has grown from 100 to 10,000 employees, and it's using its tech to save families from cancer. Our next presenter up on stage, though, this is pharma that drew the interest of the news channels when we were up in the Gold Coast earlier this week, correct? You made an appearance in a couple of news channels up there. This is the company behind a novel treatment that could change outcomes for stroke victims and deliver significant value to both patients and investors. Argenica's neuroprotective drug ARG007 or 007. Sounds better when you say 007.
007, yeah.
Aims to look, what it's aiming to do is limit brain cell damage after a stroke and other types of brain injury. So talking us through where the treatment sits, what's happening and developing, would you please welcome, and I saw the best podcast with you the other day.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
With Tim Gossage,
yes.
On the Goss. So if you can catch that one and listen to it, it's fantastic. Would you please welcome CEO and MD Liz Dallimore.
Thank you. Thanks for the very kind introduction, and thank you all. I know it's the end of the day. I know it's been a long day, so very much appreciate you hanging around to hear about Argenica. So I'll just give you a quick snapshot of, I guess, the company as a whole. We are a clinical stage drug development company, so that means we're in the clinic. We're about to test our drug in stroke patients, and we're developing novel neuroprotective drugs. So these are drugs that are able to protect brain cells following brain injury. So the first indication we're going after is stroke. That's the indication that we have in the clinic at the moment. But we've got some really exciting data, preclinical data coming up with traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's disease, and a condition in newborn infants known as hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Say that fast at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'll talk about that a bit, but I really want to focus on the stroke indication in this presentation. So currently there are no drugs on the market that are able to protect brain cells following a stroke, following HIE, following a TBI. So we're going after some huge unmet medical needs, and we're one of only a handful of companies that are actually in the clinic testing these novel neuroprotective drugs. What makes our drug unique is that it doesn't work on a single mechanism. It's actually what we call plurifunctional. So it's working on multiple mechanisms in that cell death pathway, and that is really important for neurological drugs. Neurological conditions are complex. There's lots of things going on. So having one drug that targets just one thing is never going to work. So we're really excited by the plurifunctional nature, and this is starting to really pique the interest of pharmaceutical companies, which is exciting. It's exciting when they actually start knocking on your door as opposed to the other way around. So we listed the company in June 21. We were a preclinical company at that stage. So in that 2 years, we've managed to scale up our drug manufacturing. We can manufacture it to what's known as GMP grade. So that's the grade that you need for commercial drug development. We've conducted all our safety studies preclinically, all our toxicology studies preclinically. We've tested the drug in healthy human volunteers in a phase 1 study, and we've submitted our ethics for our phase 2. So we've been pretty busy over the last 2 years, but hopefully it gives you the confidence that we've got a really fantastic team that's able to deliver on milestones. So in doing that, we've managed to increase our share price from IPO by 90% and generated significant value for shareholders. So a couple of key metrics here. So we've got just over 9 mil cash in the bank at the moment, and another couple of mil coming through from our R&D tax in the next couple of months. We've also managed to get around $4 million of non-dilutive grant funding, And that's really to fund the preclinical applications. So the cash that we raise in the company is purely sort of earmarked for the stroke phase 2 trial. And we do access this non-dilutive grant funding for our other indications, which is fantastic that we can do that. And sitting at the moment at a market cap of around 36 mil. Cheap, cheap, cheap. So a couple of key takeaways from this slide. So the lead drug candidate is ARG007. It is a peptide, which is essentially a small protein drug. It's made up of 18 arginines. The drug itself was discovered over 10 years ago at the Perrin Neuroscience Research Institute and the University of Western Australia, both based in Perth. So it's had over a decade of preclinical work done on it. So this is not a flash in the pan, quick kind of story. We're about 12 years into the drug development process. So we're actually at the really, you know, the kind of the critical end of that drug development process. We've got over 25 peer-reviewed publications. We just announced another one on Tuesday, looking at implications for the drug in Parkinson's disease. So a huge amount of de-risking work that's already gone on in terms of the efficacy of this drug in a number of these preclinical animal models. And now, again, we've shown that it's actually safe to deliver to humans and well tolerated. So I'll just quickly explain how it works in ischemic stroke. So someone that has an ischemic stroke, it's caused by a clot in a blood vessel in the brain. There's two types of strokes. It can either be ischemic, so the clot, or a hemorrhagic stroke, which is a bleed on the brain. About 85% of all strokes are ischemic, so caused by this clot in the brain. And the clot can either arise in the brain or it can arise somewhere else in the body and travel to the brain. And what that clot does is it stops the blood flow to that part of the brain. The brain cells can last about 3 seconds without blood flow. So they need the oxygen that the blood delivers to be able to survive. And once brain cells die, they're dead, they're gone, they don't regenerate. And because brain cells all talk to each other, what you get when you have that reduction in blood flow and one brain cell dying is it causes the next one to die and then the next one to die. So you get this proliferation or cascading out of cell death in the brain. And so there's a saying in stroke that time is brain. So about 1.9 million brain cells die every minute that treatment is delayed. And so obviously this results in really dire functional outcomes if you have this delay. So what we're trying to do with this drug is shut down or hibernate those brain cells. So what all our preclinical data shows is that this drug is actually able to stop that cascading out of cell death. So we can't do anything about that initial bit of cell death, but as soon as our drug's delivered, it shuts down these neurons, these brain cells, it hibernates them and protects them from all that nasty stuff that happens in the brain when you've got that lack of oxygen. And then our data shows that these brain cells, these neurons, come back to life after about 12 hours and they restore normal function, which is obviously really important. So you've got this about 12-hour window where you can get that patient to hospital, remove the clot, and hopefully completely reduce that amount of brain cell death. So ideally what we want to do is to be able to give this drug in the ambulance. That's sort of the ideal scenario. A phase 2 trial is designed slightly differently. I'll come to that in a minute. But essentially, if we can give our drug, stop that brain cell death, buy that patient time to get that clot removed, either through a clot dissolving drug or a procedure called a thrombectomy where they mechanically remove the clot, then they're going to have better functional outcome. So this is some of our preclinical data. This is in a non-human primate model and really convincingly shows how our drug is reducing that total amount of brain cell death by 66% at 24 hours post-stroke. But that's also lasting. So once blood flow is restored, where you can often get a secondary wave of brain cell death, that we're still having a 70% reduction in brain injury, which is really quite phenomenal. So really encouraging data to date. We've got that non-human primate data showing that huge reduction in brain cell death. We also know that this drug can be administered to hemorrhagic stroke patients and it won't exacerbate bleeding. So the current treatment, the clot dissolving drug for ischemic stroke, if that's administered to hemorrhagic stroke patients, they bleed out. It exacerbates the bleeding. Our drug doesn't do that. So we can give it regardless of the type of stroke and therefore before diagnosis. We also know that it can be administered concurrently with the clot dissolving drug. So we have published data to show that. And that's really, really important when you're looking at standard of care. You know, you want to be able to deliver your new drug with whatever the current standard of care is. So what really sets this drug apart? It's all these things that I've spoken about. So having that multiple mechanism of action, really important in stroke, because there's a number of different pathways of how those cells die. We've got huge amounts of preclinical efficacy data to really de-risk this drug asset. We also know the drug is a cell-penetrating peptide. The drugs you're trying to get into the brain, that's really important. You need to know that it actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets to the cells where it's needed. And as I said, doesn't exacerbate bleeding and can be delivered with clot-dissolving drugs. So I probably don't need to explain to you that the market opportunity that we're going after is massive. Current treatment of stroke is $183 billion. We have done a lot of work looking at pricing of this drug and the number of ischemic stroke patients actually presenting to emergency departments just in the US. So if we just take the US alone, delivering it to 600,000 people at $10,000 an administration, we're talking about a pretty huge market where there's currently no drugs actually on this market at the moment. So as I said, we've been really busy. We've ticked huge amounts of milestones to get into phase 2. It's not an easy process to take a drug from preclinical into a phase 2 trial, especially getting over that hurdle of a phase 1, showing that the drug is actually safe when you're administering it to humans. And now we've submitted our ethics to seek approval for that phase 2 trial. So if I just touch on the phase 2 trial quickly. So this trial will be done only in Australian hospitals, and it will be done in Australian hospitals that are able to perform thrombectomy. So that's the mechanical removal of the clot. And the reason that we're only administering it to patients that are eligible for thrombectomy is because you get this secondary wave of cell death from the thrombectomy procedure itself. So when you remove the clot, you get this huge rush of blood back into the brain, and it actually, the shearing forces of that rushing blood back into the brain causes secondary cell death. And 50% of patients that have this thrombectomy procedure actually do worse off, and they believe it's because of the reperfusion injury. You see it as well in organ transplants, this idea of reperfusion injury. So we're giving ourselves the best chance to also see efficacy because of this reperfusion injury. So we'll have a couple of hospitals in Melbourne that will be on this trial. So we've got the Alfred Hospital, and we're also bringing on Sunshine Hospital as well, who interestingly don't do thrombectomy, but will be delivering our drug there and then bringing them into thrombectomy centres into the CBD. The whole purpose of the trial really is to look at safety, so looking at safety in ischemic stroke patients, but we will be measuring infarct volume, or the total amount of brain cell death via imaging, as a secondary endpoint, as well as collecting a whole bunch of functional recovery data. So this is absolutely critical for our company. This is really where we've got that proof of concept that our drug works in stroke patients. And this is going to be, this data coming out is going to be the thing that will allow us to do a deal with a pharma company. So we should be dosing first patients by the end of this calendar year, early next year. And we have an amazing team that is leading this trial. I might quickly skip over this, but they're fantastic. So Tina and Jane, both based in Melbourne, and really taking a lead role in running this trial. Because I just want to quickly touch on the pipeline. So the phase 2 trial is blinded, so we won't get data out. So we obviously need news flow as we go along and starting to progress some of these other indications. So traumatic brain injury, obviously massive market, currently no treatments available for traumatic brain injury. It's gonna, when we talk about traumatic brain injury, mild TBI, which is concussion, there is gonna have to be a therapy. So it's all well and good having protocols in place, absolutely, and that reduces the inflammation, but we need something that's gonna protect against the initial injury. So what you see that happens in the brain when someone suffers a TBI, you get inflammation, but you get this calcium influx, really similar to what you see in stroke. So we've recently announced preclinical data to show that our drug is having a significant impact in protecting brain cells following TBI. And we've got a federal government grant to progress that work into concussion. Alzheimer's, so what happens in neurodegenerative conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, is you get an accumulation of proteins, beta amyloid protein, tau protein, and alpha-synuclein. And it's this aggregation of these proteins that sits on your brain and causes the dementia. So we've now got really nice data to show our drug reduces the aggregation of beta amyloid, it reduces the aggregation alpha-synuclein, and we're hoping it will also reduce the aggregation of tau. My time's up, isn't it? And we've also looking at this hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So this is when the cord is around the neck in newborn infants, the mother has preeclampsia, and that baby suffers a lack of oxygen or a hypoxia. And so we've got, again, really great preclinical data, so we'll progress that. And you're standing up, and these are the investment highlights. And thank you very much, and the presentation, and I'm outside. Thank you.
Well done,
Sorry.
Liz. And check out that podcast. It's on chapter 1 too. It's really interesting. Staying with biotech to complete our lineup of tech investment opportunities, Volpara, which is a company that you'll be very interested to know, has achieved 3 straight quarters cash flow positive. Big round of applause for that to start with, please. So we're going to learn about the potential of tech, which has been developed in England, headquartered in Wellington, New Zealand, listed on the ASX, run by an American, a very passionate American. This is Teri Thomas. She is the CEO. This woman has actually tried to retire 3 times. She was consulting into this company. They brought her in to consult, and she's now ended up replacing the founder. She's so passionate about what they're doing and how they're helping families to combat cancer. So cancer doesn't have this huge negative effect on them, that she said, bugger it, I'm staying. So she's grown them from 100 to 10,000 employees. Let's see if she can grow your investment portfolio. Please make her welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to share with you a bit about Volpara. Now, I have far more slides than I'm actually going to talk about, so I will let you know that we have on our little table over there all of the slides, including the ones I skip over, and a couple extra bonus point ones if you are really curious about things Volpara. But I have 15 minutes, so I'm going to do it pretty quickly. First of all, some investment highlights for you. We are a software company. We provide technology, and what we do is we save families from cancer by early detection and even prevention of cancer by determining who's at risk, identifying who needs to get genetic testing, and putting people on a personalized plan to either detect cancer early or even potentially avoid them getting cancer to begin with. Given that this is an investor conference, here is the obligatory set of numbers about our company. Again, I'll let you take a look at this in more detail. A couple things I'll point out. First of all, as I mentioned, we're a SaaS company. We've got really strong recurring revenue models. So 65% of our customers are multi-year contracts. We have no concentration risk in that we don't have a single customer that's driving a lot of that revenue. And as I mentioned, what drew me to Volpara, I have a nursing background, saving families from cancer. I worked in the electronic medical records space, so I have a lot of experience in software, but I've never seen a company so passionate about the purpose and connecting with our customers on this really, really important thing. 1 in 8 women get diagnosed with breast cancer at some point in their life, and the problem is that it's actually growing. And what really makes me sad is that it's growing in younger people. So people in their 30s and 40s are getting diagnosed with cancer more often than they had 10 years ago. And so this is an incredibly important problem that we're trying to address. I'm going to skip some of these slides, a bit about types of customers. We talk about elephants. We sell to some of the big organizations, and we estimate that we've gotten about 10%, maybe 12% market penetration in the United States, which is responsible for over 95% of our revenue. We are growing in Australia as well. I got another note this morning about another private provider putting Volpara software in place in Australia. And so we do have really nice, strong revenue growth, as you can see. We have contracted annual recurring revenue, as well as our ARR is measured when customers are fully deployed. And we've got really strong visibility about our future revenue. But as mentioned, I'm quite proud of this graph. I've been CEO for 1 year and 1 quarter. And so we went from spending revenue to getting them together to where I expect they need to be. So 3 quarters in a row of cash flow positive and looking good to continue. 12 million in the bank and not going down. Well, I'm going to skip over this. We've got a great partnership with Microsoft. We've won 2 awards with them. They're a great partner with us in AI, and I'll come on to that a little bit at the very end. But let me tell you a little bit more about why what we do matters and how it relates to breast cancer. So these are breasts. By the way, these are breasts as well. You can say Volpara showed you their breasts. Now, when you look at those breasts, the one on the left, A, that is a low-dense fatty breast. The one on the right, B, is a high-density breast. It's got a lot of fibroglandular tissue in it. The little circle is a cancer. And so in the fatty breast, the low-density breast, you can see it quite plainly. The one on the right, that's also cancer. You can't tell that it's cancer, and you can't tell it from a mammogram. You also can't tell if somebody has dense breasts by squeezing them. You can't tell by looking at them. You can only tell by a mammogram. And so what started our company was deep understanding of breast density and creating a proprietary patented algorithm to do a volumetric analysis and a very, very precise measurement of that breast density. And that's important because it both is a risk for cancer, a much higher risk of cancer if you have breast density, but it also hides the cancer. This is what one of our products looks like. I won't show you all of them. We've got 3 families of products, but that at the top is our breast density. This is a risk categorization. So I mentioned we can gather information about your family history. How old were you when you first had children? Your breast density. Are you Ashkenazi Jewish? Are you menopausal or not? All of these factors have an impact on the odds that you're going to get cancer. So we pull that together for the radiologist alongside the image. Also verify that this is a good quality image. Everything was positioned correctly, compressed correctly. The machinery was working right to help them make the right decision about what to do with this patient, as well as reporting back to the doctor quickly and efficiently. Now, breast density is put across 4 categories, A, B, C, and D. A, that's that fatty tissue where you can see that tumor really easily. My kids could have diagnosed it. D, that was the other one on the right where there was a lot of dense tissue. But most women actually sit in between B and C, right at the line. So this is a B, this is a C. A radiologist is going to look at these images, they're going to turn them, they're going to peer at them, they're going to try to figure out, all right, which of these needs to go on for further testing and which of these is going to get a report that says your mammogram is normal. You cannot tell the difference with the human eye between this B and this C, and that's where most women sit. So that's why Volpara is a necessary component in good quality care and mammography. As I mentioned, also most women, 90%, who carry a genetic predisposition to cancer are blissfully unaware, maybe not blissfully, but they are unaware. And so we also gather the information to figure out who ought to get genetic testing. We package it up, we send it to the genetic labs, and that's a revenue stream for us. We also are doing increasingly outreach and communication directly to patients. So we provide the ability for a patient to see their mammogram and to understand what does what does A mean, what does B mean, what does C mean, and even educating GPs. As I mentioned, we can figure out if this was a good quality image. Was the chest wall visible? Was the nipple in profile? Were we squeezing just right, not too hard, not too soft? By the way, you can overcompress, and if you overcompress, number 1, your image isn't that great, but number 2, the woman never wants to get a mammogram again. We save time, and that's why people actually pay for the software. You know, quality is really important, but what really matters to a lot of the radiologists and the doctors is, can I get home to my kids on time? So we look at things like how much time does it take for you to do all of the necessary work for passing your audit and being accredited to do mammograms. But the other thing that's really important, and this is from Virginia Mason, 37% reduction in inadequate images Every time somebody does a mammogram and goes home and the radiologist is reading it and realizing it's not a good enough quality mammogram, they were moving around or it wasn't compressed right or the machinery wasn't tuned right, and they call the patient and say, come back. Of course, the patient thinks, oh my God, I have cancer. And sometimes they think they have cancer for months because there is a global shortage of radiologists, so it's taking time to get people in. So this is actually extremely important to women to make sure that we do the best job when they're there and we don't scare them by bringing them back when maybe they were perfectly fine. So I mentioned we do more than breast cancer, so endometrial, ovarian, colorectal, pancreatic, lung, and we're entering into the cardiology space. We've got a new algorithm for identifying if somebody's at risk of heart disease. As a byproduct of looking at this image, we can see buildup of calcium in the breast arteries, and that is a marker that maybe, instead of just finding out, do I maybe have breast cancer, it may be that I need to go see the cardiologist. So that's something that we've developed with Microsoft. It's in the hands of researchers to go through the process before we can apply for FDA. And this is an area that's getting enormous attention in the United States. I'm not going to read all of these, but I will point out the FDA has made a ruling that every single woman getting a mammogram needs to be told which of these sides do they fit on. And one is not dense, and they go home and they're fine. One is dense, and it's recommended that they get an MRI or an ultrasound, remembering that most of them fit right in the middle. So very important for us, very good for our sales team. We've got a very healthy pipeline. And just 2 weeks ago, I was in the United States visiting with Microsoft, and Jill Martin, 10-time Emmy Award winner, newscaster, came forth, shocked me because I just heard it in the background with her story of cancer, tearfully talking about getting a normal mammogram with dense breasts. Turns out it wasn't a normal mammogram. She should have been sent on for further imaging. She found out because she got a genetic test that said you have a predisposition for cancer, you ought to get an MRI. She thought it was just to assure herself that everything was clear, and in fact she has cancer. So she came in with a strong, every woman needs to know their risk, which we do. Everyone needs to know if they have dense breasts, which we do. So really, really good attention for us, and really, really good for women to be empowered with better understanding of their bodies. So fabulous growth outlook for us. And that's really all I wanted to share about Volpara. Am I on time? Well, I can talk about more if you want.
So much, Teri. Did anyone have any questions that wanted to ask Teri at all? Because it is her bit of time, so I'd hate for her to miss out an opportunity to connect with you. Is there anything you'd like to ask before you disappear off into the wilderness today? On the second set.
Thank you. You mentioned the other cancers that you can screen for. Colorectal cancer, you can screen for that or get some indicators from breast tissue?
It's not actually from the tissue in that case. It's gathering information from the electronic medical record that we pull together to run through some algorithms and assess your risk. A number of these cancers actually run as families and are related to each other. So we can figure out, and ultimately in the end, our risk product will apply equally to men and women. But like right now, when a woman has high risk of breast cancer, she might also have high risk of ovarian cancer and or colorectal cancer, or if her father has colorectal cancer, it actually can increase her odds of breast cancer. So we focus on the cancers that have some connections, and it's based on your family history, your ethnic background, and a number of other factors about the rest of your life, but not your breast specifically.
Teri, thank you so much for that. Very much appreciate it. Actually, no, you're holding on to breasts. It's a bit tricky to do that. Hold your breast. Give me your breast there. Would you please? Thank you very much, everyone. Volpara rounding us out today. There you go. Are you informed now? Opportunities and Great West is